Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a Thursday. Thursday Thoughts. We will be accepting yours on the Twitters at Soccer Down Here, on the Twitch pitch, twitch.tv/Soccer Down Here. Also, you can send us an email, soccerdownhere@gmail. That works too. You can send us a message if you don't want your thoughts to be public yet until we talk about them on the show, which we will. So then they'll become public, and that's how it goes. That's what we do around here. We're not doing a 3-hour show today because there will be a recording with our good friend Jessica Charman coming up a little bit later, and that will be on your podcatchers later today. We're going to talk a lot about the She Believes Cup, but also we're taking your questions for Jess on Twitter as well. You can go to my Twitter at Longshoe and answer my question for you guys. We'll get into a few of those. Jess is not just here, and this is something that Jess and I have talked about. This is not Women's Soccer Hour with Jessica Charman. It is Jess talking soccer. And yes, women's soccer is part of talking soccer, and we do it here too. It's not separate, and she is not only talking about women's soccer. We're going to talk about She Believes because it just finished, and the United States won it, which was no surprise coming in. They didn't concede a goal. It's news. We're going to talk about it. But that's not what Jess's show is. It's something we've tried to do consistently on SDH is soccer. People talk about it. And we talk about the women's game. The women that we have on our show, Jess, Kelly, talk about the men's game. We talk soccer. That's how we do it. So we'll be talking about the She Believes Cup. There wasn't much to talk about with the U.S. women's game, honestly, last night. It was no surprise. It could have been worse. Argentina put up a couple of good performances. They had no chance against the United States. We knew that coming into the tournament. I don't know if Vlatko Andonovski got any questions answered really in that match. He got a chance to see a few people. Alex Morgan got back on the score sheet, which is always good. I don't know if any of the questions we talked about yesterday have any clearer answers today after the match. It's still going to be very hard for him to whittle his roster down from a World Cup roster of 23 to an Olympic roster of 18. It's going to be some tough decisions for him to make.
No doubt about it. And, Sam Stejkal over at The Athletic decided to go ahead and project on the men's side. Haven't seen any kind of projections on the women's side yet. But, no, this is going to be one of the toughest things that Vlatko was going to sit there and try to figure out. You're right at like a +5. And so how do you trim? And you were, when we broke down the positions and how you've got to be versatile with this 18 to be able to play in multiple positions, that's the key here. And I know that I had brought up Carly Lloyd as one of those individuals that, that is probably on the bubble because you're trying to figure out what she can do, how she can be a part of the whole discussion. And it's going to come down to versatility. And you're having to deal with that getting into the situation now. Yeah,
versatility is key, and Abby makes a good point. Seeing Emily Sonnet play a few different roles in the tournament was big. I think she's in. I think she has to be because she can give you cover all across the back line, and you're going to need that. There were a lot of people, and Jason Nix was included in this, that were annoyed that they squeezed in a men's national team Olympic segment into halftime. I'm not as annoyed by it because they do the same and they should do the same on men's games that are of an equivalent stature. Like, it's a World Cup qualifier. No, I don't want anything else, jutting into the conversation. I want to break down the game. You knew what this game was going to be going into it. You knew halftime there wasn't going to be a lot to talk about with the game. There's not a lot to break down. Of course, things could change, but you knew you had to fill some time. You had the news on the Olympic side with the men and the preliminary roster. Could you have used that for a conversation on the women's side? Sure. I do believe, and maybe it's just in my head, that they have done these situations in reverse, where on a men's game, they have talked about women's news and women's national team situations. I believe they have. I might be misremembering that. If they have not ever done that, then what they did last night was 100% wrong. If they have, then it's the same thing. And the more that everything is treated in the same thing, I think the more that the women's game actually grows from it. I think that's the important thing is it shouldn't be this separate world. It's not. Just like Emma Hayes talked about from Chelsea, where she was linked to the AFC Wimbledon job, and she's like, I'm in a great place over here. They can't afford me. Like, why would I go there? It's not a better, higher plane. I'm at Chelsea. I'm at one of the biggest clubs in the world. I have one of the best rosters in the world. I'm not going to go coach AFC Wimbledon. You crazy? So it's in the same world. So if you're talking news, okay. And I know at least at a minimum on men's games, they have talked general soccer news at halftime. On an MLS game, they have talked general things. I get that. And I'm okay with that. The situation dictates it. If it's a bigger game, if it's a certain kind of game, no. Focus only on the game. In my preferences, I would rather do that always, but I know that's not realistic, so that's not ever going to happen. I didn't take it as a slight against women's soccer. I didn't. I took it as filling programming. Now, if they don't do the same on the men's games, and I believe they have, but if they have not ever done it, then I am 100% wrong here. If they haven't done it on that side, then it's wrong what they did. If they have, then it's just what they do in some of these kinds of games that are not as meaningful.
And that, for me, is the key. And I think that in my recollections as well, I've seen crossover discussions when it comes to national team games as well. That's what I remember too. If it's a women's national team game, there have been discussions at halftime about the men. If it's been a men's discussion because the women are doing fantastic things internationally, they have competitions coming up. There's been that crossover to my recollection as well. And so for me, I'm viewing it from the broadcast perspective of a national team broadcast. So therefore, you would be treating the information the same on the women's side and the men's side. You'd be getting both when a national team is being discussed. That's what I remember too.
Yeah, I don't know. I know it's easy to get worked up about it, and I feel like sometimes maybe we're looking for things to get worked up about when it comes to the women's game. In my opinion, and this is purely my opinion, the more and more soccer shows are soccer shows and not so regimented and not so drawing big lines and saying, no, you can't color outside the lines. The better off the game it will be. You know, I mean, we've basically tried to do that across the board. And it's not a male-female thing. It is a soccer is soccer thing. And I've found that our listeners are interested whether we're talking about women's soccer, whether we're talking about South American soccer, whether we're talking about this crazy story in Turkey that we're going to talk about later today. It's all about the game and what's interesting in the game. It doesn't have to be so narrow. And I think, you know, some of that's just the world of podcasts and narrow casting, and I get it. I understand it. You want to talk about one thing and one thing only. Okay. I think the game grows if you have people talking about the game as a whole. When they had the segments on the Champions League, for example, and they were talking about best players in the world or favorite players. I can't remember the exact conversation, but Alex Scott mentioned female players and was talking about it and asked Jamie Carragher, and he had nothing to say. Yeah, they pointed it out. They said, look, dude, no. And then he came back with a list later because that grows the conversation. You need to grow the conversation across the board. Of course, you're not going to force things in because it doesn't fit, and that's something that is also very important. But in my opinion, women's soccer fits. Conversation about the world fits. And if it's on a halftime of a game, it's a made-up tournament that the U.S. Soccer Federation has created. It's a game that was never going to be in dispute in terms of who was going to win this thing. It was never going to be any shock of who was going to win the tournament. Okay. Now, what I would like to see, and maybe it will happen because of the response, is in the men's Olympic qualifying games, dedicate a halftime segment in one of the early games, to what the women's Olympic roster will look like, because there is an absolute conversation to be had there. So I want to see it. I'm going to also, like, people are really freaking out about one question that I think JP Dellacamera had about the Olympic roster size. It's a mistake, and it happens. I talk about it all the time, and I know I drive John crazy and Jarrett crazy and Nick crazy because I get really hung up on details. Because it's,
as you should.
But no, it's really easy to get the details mixed up in these situations. JP's an amazing broadcaster. Mm-hmm. So let's chill out on trashing JP because he made a mistake. It happens. He gets a pass. Okay? He gets a pass on making one mistake. The man has done more in American soccer broadcasting than any of us. He made a mistake. And he would put his hand up and say he made a mistake. It's hard sometimes. It's hard to remember. Yeah, the Olympics, for some reason, the Olympics decided to have 18 on their roster instead of 23. It's a dumb rule on the Olympic side. But it's hard sometimes to remember it. It's hard to get into the MLS roster rules, and we all mix things up, and I try really hard not to because I know what it can do in terms of confusion. I get it. But I make mistakes too. Everybody does. So let's get the mistakes corrected, and when a legend makes a mistake, we can relax a little bit. He didn't do it intentionally, and trust me, and this is the thing that I think is an overreach, JP didn't do it because he doesn't respect the product, he doesn't respect the women's game or any of that. JP's called more big U.S. women's national team games than anybody else. He has dedicated so much of his life to growing the women's game. He made a mistake on the roster size thing, which is a dumb thing that the Olympics instituted anyway. So it happens. And Abby, I'm not talking about you specifically, but I've seen outrage. And it's like, guys, people will make mistakes. Legends will make mistakes. Let's not take it too far. It happened. You fix it. You move on. There's a lot of confusing things in the sport that we love so much. And it is sometimes very difficult to keep up with some of the minute details. And that's where all of us need help from producers and need help from researchers and statisticians and all of it. And if you don't have it, if you don't have those people, we don't. You gotta put in even more work to make sure you have it right. So it's just the business, and even if you do, you're still going to make a mistake. So it happens. J-Dub asks, is there any reasoning from the Olympics folks why the roster is 18, or did they arbitrarily choose that number? My understanding is they arbitrarily chose it. I've not ever heard an explanation of it is this because we think we understand soccer better than anybody else who runs the game in the world, because they don't. I don't know. I'm assuming it just came down to they wanted to limit the number of athletes in this sport. So it's a goofy thing. I think it's too small. I mean, at a minimum, I think it should be 20. I think you should probably do it just the same as any other major tournament where it's 23 and just move on, but it is what it is. They don't know any better than FIFA. They don't know any better than UEFA or CONMEBOL or CONCACAF or anybody else. So I don't know why they did it. IOC, and Thomas Joines asking, the IOC runs Olympic competition. They do work with FIFA, but it is IOC's final decision on how these things go. One explanation of how all this goes on terms of Olympic soccer is on the women's side, it is a senior tournament. There's no age restriction. On the men's side, because FIFA would not allow them to do a senior tournament because it would cut into the Men's World Cup, which is FIFA's big baby. I understand that. That's their big moneymaker. They limited it to U23. So that was an agreement that the IOC and FIFA made. I mean, FIFA can't tell the IOC, you have to have 23 here. I guess if they really wanted to, they could threaten to pull their players from it, which would mean all the players wouldn't be able to play, which wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess that's really the only thing. But it's the IOC's tournament, so they make the rules on those things.
Yeah, Taka says also a 20-man roster is incredibly rare. Only the Olympics does that, and I just found out 48 hours ago, meaning Taka found out.
Yeah, it happens. Cut JP some slack. Trust me, he'll make it up to y'all really, really quickly because he puts in so much work and so much time, and he does such a great job. I mean, the first American soccer commentator I heard as a kid was Jean-Paul Dellacamera doing MISL games on ESPN. That was the first American of American soccer. I saw the World Cup in '86, calling World Cup games on NBC, but the first American soccer I remember seeing was JP calling MISL, and then JP calling U.S. men's. I think first it was Olympic qualifiers for '88, and then qualifiers for the '90 World Cup. It was always JP. So I mean, he is the guy. He is the GOAT when it comes to American soccer broadcasting.
Yeah, JP and Ty Keogh, JP and Seamus Mallon. I mean, that's where you grew up. If you're watching soccer, that was your touchstone was JP, and whether it was indoors or outdoors. And I'll be the first guy to sit there and say I was addicted to the indoor soccer game. I would watch the MISL any chance I get, whether it was on ESPN or USA. It was always JP, and and when JP came to town and did the Thrashers, I thought that was one of the coolest things ever to have a legend like JP Dellacamera come and call Atlanta Thrashers games. I thought, add that to the resume.
Yeah, well, JP's a great hockey commentator, too. That's where he started. And he was great on Thrashers games, and he loved Atlanta. I had a conversation with him at the NSCAA convention after the Thrashers left. I guess it would have been a few months after that because it was in January after they left. And he said how much he hated not being in Atlanta anymore. He loved the city, loved working here, loved the fans of the Thrashers, and hated that everything happened the way it did. He's just a legendary commentator, but he is American soccer through and through. Okay, so lots of different things on the women's game last night. Lots of things off the field because, again, the actual match wasn't all that great, to be perfectly honest. One other game on the women's front that didn't get really any attention in this country, and I think it's an important one when you start to look at the Olympics and you look at contenders and you look at the women's game as a whole, is the Netherlands. The Netherlands have won 2 in a row. They beat Germany yesterday, who was the number 2 ranked team in the world. Somehow, I would have thought it would have been the Netherlands, who were in the World Cup final in 2019. Beat Belgium 6-1 in their first game of this international window. They beat Germany. It's a huge win, and the Dutch have to be considered a contender for the gold medal. They gave the U.S. a lot to handle in that World Cup final in 2019, and I think they're only getting better. They have some of the best players in the world, in Viviane Miedema, in Lieke Martens, in Danielle Van de Donk. They've got some of the best players in the world, and they don't get as much attention as they should. This will be Serena Wigman's final competition with the Dutch national team. She's taken over that England job, which I think she will elevate them even further. Amazing manager, one of the best in the world, and the Dutch have to be a medal contender and a gold medal contender this summer in Tokyo.
What's your top 5 right now?
U.S., Netherlands, Germany's in there. U.S. Netherlands is 1-2. The other 3, I don't really know where they fit just yet. Germany's there. France is there because of the talent they have. And I think England's got to be there, although there's questions with Phil Neville now in Miami and Wigman not taking over until after the Olympics. Maybe that 5th spot is up for grabs because we don't know how England will respond to this kind of in-between situation with a caretaker manager for the Olympics. The Olympics is Team GB anyway, so it's kind of a weird situation to begin with. I'll put them there for now. I don't think Brazil or Canada did enough to show they're able to jump into that. I think Spain is just a little bit further back to jump into that conversation. Spain and Italy, 2 teams that we saw in the last World Cup that did well. So I'll put England there for now, but they could get knocked out of that.
And that was my biggest question with England, with Neville going out, Wiegman coming in. You've got a caretaker. You have that transitional element there and that gap space. And how
but it's Team GB as well, so it's not even really England, so it's a little more confusing. Byrne says England is stronger than Holland, more talent, deeper. Maybe. I'm not 100% there with you just yet. Maybe a little bit deeper, but I don't know if they have more top-line talent. Love to see that match. And it's going to be really interesting after the Olympics when it is Serena Wigman leading England against her former team in the Netherlands. That'll be a must-see match. I hope we get to that point here very soon. I know in terms of women's soccer coverage in this country, it is extremely U.S.-focused. We get some carryover from Canada being our neighbors. When they play somebody, we hear about what's going on with that other team. When the Netherlands plays England or Germany or Spain's playing, I'd love to have those games be more widely available and at least mentioned a little bit. We're going to try to do our best. One of the biggest things, I've said it so many times, I'll continue to say it, it's true across the board in soccer, but especially true in the women's game, access to information, access to what is going on so you know the basics, because we know it on the men's side. We don't always know it on the women's side. We will do our best to try to fill that gap wherever we can, because it's important. Who are the contenders for the gold medal? The U.S. isn't going to walk in there and just show up and be handed the gold medal, and it feels like maybe that's how the vibe is here. It's not the case. It's not the case at all. So who's going to push them? We'll continue to drill down on that a little bit as we get closer.
Yeah, I think the gap has definitely shrunk between the world and the United States. And I mean, we've seen it in the last, we saw it in the last World Cup, so I think that those margins are a lot smaller than they have been in the past. I want to see how this Olympic tournament ends up, and I want to see how it ends up with the medal chase. I think this is going to be an interesting tournament for a bunch of different reasons.
England is Team GB, so they will have to incorporate at least a few players for somewhat, political reasons, from Scotland, from Wales, from Northern Ireland into the team. So it won't be a true England team. There's some players who can help them, absolutely. But it won't be a true England team in this. So that could be a little also interesting. See, I've already screwed something up this morning, so I'm going to put my hand up. Thomas Jawin calling me out. He did some research because Thomas Jawin is a lawyer and always does research. FIFA organizes the Olympic football tournament, so I guess in reality it is FIFA's call on the 18, but I know the IOC is involved in some degree because it's their tournament. So how that goes, if FIFA organizes it but the IOC sets things or how they negotiate what the rules are, I don't know. There's always been that discussion on the men's side about U23 and overage players and finding that compromise. So I don't know behind the scenes. I don't know what the boardroom looks like there, but FIFA, not the IOC, technically organizes the Olympic football tournament. I don't know if they set the rules. Maybe they organize the actual event, because I think that's the case for most Olympic sports, where whoever the governing body is for that sport might run the competition, but do they set all of the rules going in? That part I don't know. So, but I was incorrect in my language. Thank you for our legal team to fix this. That's what we do.
Good to have a legal.
The rules are in a FIFA book, and there's a few references to consultation with the IOC. There's a lot of consultation with the IOC. I know that for a fact, because there's been even talk at points about FIFA not being involved in the Olympics anymore because of some of those consultations that haven't always run so smoothly. It's tricky. I wonder if at some point FIFA is going to say, hey, we've let you have the senior women's teams for the Olympic tournament for this long. We're trying to grow our own competition now, make the Women's World Cup bigger. We're not going to give you that anymore. It's now going to be a U23 tournament. Be curious to see where all that goes. Anyway, okay. Couple more thoughts on the Twitch pitch as we have started on She Believes and the women's national team and women's soccer in general. And we'll, again, continue that, especially on She Believes, more of the roster and the way the tournament went as a whole with Jessica Charman on Written on the Pitch later today. Be looking at your local listings for when that pops up on your pod catchers.
Set your alerts.
Yes, something like that. Couple more on the Twitch pitch before we go. Jason Nix, I think one of the great advantages of the U.S. women's national team is depth. A smaller squad should level the field somewhat. Yeah, it can. And we saw the last Olympics where the U.S. went out in the quarterfinal stage to Sweden. And the Swedish team, as Hope Solo said, were cowards and played very defensively. They did play very defensively. Calling them cowards is a little bit of a stretch. That got way overplayed, though. They played negative soccer. They did. And Pia Sundhage did it intentionally because she knew that it would frustrate the U.S. women and it was their best chance to advance. Welcome to the world. If Hope Solo said that about that game, which, again, is not necessarily incorrect, Man, I need Hope Solo talking about West Brom games right now because I would love to hear what she has to say about that. Talk about cowards. Anyway, a smaller squad, yeah, you don't have as many options off the bench. Absolutely. One injury can affect everything because of that. You know, when you're getting into player number 20, 22, 23 on the roster, the U.S. player is probably going to be better than most in the world. Byrne says the gap will never really disappear since the base for women's soccer is so much bigger in the U.S. I don't know about that at the top anyway. I think the gap in terms of the overall size of the pool, I'm with you, because, yeah, the college game is such a huge element of developing that next level. In the youth game, you have so many girls playing, and compared to other countries, that is a huge gap. But at the top level, I think other countries have closed the gap to where it's not much of a gap at the top. And I think England is an example of that. I think Germany, I think France, I think the Netherlands, the ones we've talked about, are an example of that. On a given day, they can beat the U.S., no problem. It's not that they have to have a perfect game anymore to be able to play at that level. I mean, I think right below that, Japan, Brazil, Canada, if they can continue to get this young generation coming through. Spain is really close. There's more coming, which is a lot of fun. But the overall size of the base, I agree, and it will probably be that for a long time until other countries see the effect that the U.S. did, I mean, in the 90s, where you had girls playing before, but it wasn't really looked at the same way. When you had the 96 Olympics in this country, in this state, and the U.S. won it, you saw more girls start to play and say, I want to be Mia Hamm. 99 World Cup in this country, you saw more girls say, I want to be Julie Foudy. I want to be Brianna Scurry. I want to be Brandi Chastain. And more girls started to play. More money went into the college games. You had a professional league try to get started. And it kept going back and forth and trying to get it done right. You finally have done it right. You have the NWSL. 20-plus years of that growth, you've grown the base. Other countries need that. England is starting to see it now. You're seeing more attention and more investment in the women's game. Spain is starting to see it. Italy's starting to see it with their domestic league. I mean, even Argentina, their league's professional now for the first time ever. You're starting to see these things across the world, and it's going to take them time. Here, you grew this base really over 20 to 30 years. So in 20 to 30 years, maybe bases will be similar. I don't know if the U.S. base will grow even further and continue to grow that gap. But at the very top, when you're not talking about the base, you're talking about the best 20 players in the country, I don't think the gap is very huge anymore. I really don't. And I think it can be closed with coaching. I think it can be closed with philosophy and game models and structure in a match and tactics in a match. I think the U.S. is not so far ahead that they are just walking into any big tournament as the favorite anymore. I don't see that. 3TH said, totally conceivable that the IOC could have said they want a smaller squad for completely non-sport reasons, which absolutely they could have. I don't know that case. I don't know if that was the decision or not. What were you going to say, John?
Oh, no, just Bart Keeler's article is now up at soccerdownhere.net about the tournament itself. Bart's comments, a perfect record, but not a perfect performance from the WNT, and she believes. So if you would like to read more, Bart's article's up at soccerdownhere.net.
Very nice. YouTube says, granted, there's always some homerism and shared language biases, but the U.S. women's national team and Canadian focus may also be due partially to the sheer amount of national team players in the league due to allocated contracts. Sure, I'm not so much talking about the league. I'm talking just in general, like, when we talk about the U.S. men's national team and we talk about men's national teams, period, it's not solely in this country U.S. focused. And hey, look, it's down to Lionel Messi in Argentina. You're going to talk about the guy. You're going to talk about his team. You're going to talk about Portugal because of Ronaldo. You're going to talk about England because of the shared language and because of so many people who watch the Premier League. You're going to talk about Germany because of all the trophies they've won, et cetera, et cetera. That it's different on the men's side. But on the women's side, we don't really ever, and this struck me in 2019 when I was in Canada in the lead up to the Women's World Cup. I think, who were we playing? I don't remember. We were in Canada, and they were talking about the prep for the Women's World Cup, and on TSN, they were not just showing segments about the Canadian national team or the U.S. women's national team. They would show a 5-minute segment on their Sports Center about Germany, and then about England, and then about France. And they were breaking down all of the teams. I feel like we don't get that here in women's soccer coverage, where we talk about who are the players to watch with the Netherlands? Are they a contender? Can they take the next step? What about England now that Phil Neville's not there? What is Team GB going to look like in this tournament? What about Spain? Are they ready to become a contender? Can Germany hold on? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Brazil, we can keep going. We don't get as much of that because it's so U.S. focused when we talk about the national team. Not the league stuff, but just the national team. And I feel like at times there's a perception that the U.S. can't lose because we don't know anything about these other teams.
Yeah.
I ran into that so much in 2019 when we were doing the cup dates with Jess and Kelly, and I would hear from people, and it's like, well, the U.S. is so good, they're the favorite, such a big favorite, and I'm like, England outplayed them in the semi. England probably should have won the semifinal and moved on to the final against the Netherlands. They were the better team. And it doesn't come up in the conversation because it's all U.S. focused. I think the game would grow going into these tournaments if we talk more about these other teams. And we're gonna try to do that as best we can. But we're not the leaders in the soccer conversation in this country. We do the best we can to put out as much as we can. But there are people at big outlets that I think the game would grow by sharing that spotlight just a little bit more as opposed to making it so narrowly focused.
No, and I think that when you get into large competitions, I think that, let's say as an example, like when the NCAA tournament is coming up around the corner in national newspapers, and I just dated myself with that reference. And now,
isn't there like one?
Yeah, there's one now. When the tournament would happen, you'd have the field of 64 plus 4 or whatever. You'd have the 9-page preview of the tournament where you'd have all the capsules of all the 68 teams or 65 or 66 or however many there was. You'd have all of this information there so you could sit there and be as informed as possible for your pools or anything else and just watching. But I think that to have that knowledge base should help in any competition. I think that should be the effort in any competition that's coming forward so everyone can sit there and be as informed as possible about a result if something happens and sit there and say, well, yeah, because of players A, B, C, D, and E, this is why we should be paying attention to these clubs. And I think that having all of that information and having as much information out there, I think it should be big when it comes to competitions, just so we're informed.
See, this is why I love Thursday Thoughts, because it can go deeper into some things just this time of the week. We're generally in between game talk, and we can kind of just dive into a topic. I didn't expect we would go this deep into this, but it's good, and we've still got questions, so we're gonna try to continue on this for just a little bit longer. If you have more women's soccer questions, throw them in right now on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. If you have them later, if you're listening to this later, ask us on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. You can tag me at Longshoe. You can tag John at OSG Nelson. You can tag Jess Talks Footy because she loves to dig into this stuff too. We'll talk about it either on social media or we'll bring it up in a future show. But I love when we get into stuff like this from Mizano. National team question. Why doesn't the teams/nations on the men's and women's side match? See, JP's calling you right now. Why doesn't the teams and nations on the men's and women's side match? Why wouldn't you expect the nations who have the top men's teams to also have the top women's teams? Why doesn't this occur? That's an amazing sociology question. That's an amazing cultural question. It's an amazing equality question. There's so much that goes into it that we cannot do it justice in this format. But I'll tell you what I've always kind of stuck to with it. I do think it's changing. I really think it's changing, and it's changing fast. But, for example, in Latin countries, girls weren't encouraged to play sports on a regular basis. They just weren't. When I first started with soccer in the streets, we worked with the Women's Sports Foundation on a grant for a girls' league in Latino communities in Atlanta. And what was fascinating about what it turned into, because it changed, like the grant had this idea of, you'll get young girls under the age of 10 playing in a league format. Very cool. Very simple, but also very necessary. What it turned into was something that was really unique, and it's survived on today. And Jose Almaraz, who has done great work in the soccer community in the city for a number of years, Jose and his family really worked to cultivate the situation where what it turned into, instead of just the young girls playing, then it was the older girls were like, well, we want to play too. We want teams. So you work to create teams with them. Then the moms were like, well, we want to play. And the older teams became a lot of mothers and daughters playing together. And then what flipped, because if you went at this time, and it's still the same today, if you went to the local leagues that, look, if you're a gringo, you might not even know they exist. But if you go to these leagues, what you would often see was the boys playing earlier in the day, the men playing later in the day, the families on the sidelines. It was always the family day out. You'd have food, you'd have, community. It was very, 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 very cool. But it was always the women and the girls on the sidelines and the boys and the men playing. This league flipped it, and it was so cool to see the boys cheering on their sisters, the dads cheering on their daughters, the husbands cheering on their wives, the men running the grill and the concession stand, and the women playing. And it was very, very cool. And it continues on, and they've had tournaments almost like Open Cup kind of tournaments for teenage and young adult teams in the Latino communities here. It's very, very cool. But that didn't happen. That was in like the 2006, 7, 8, that kind of time frame. It just wasn't there before. So I can also tell you from another cultural aspect that I did not grow up in and understanding, we at Soccer in the Streets did a lot of work in the refugee community in Clarkston. And girls were not even just not encouraged to play. A lot of times girls were not allowed to play due to cultural beliefs in countries that these girls came from. And at times it created real significant issues where girls wanted to play sports in this country because girls are encouraged to play sports in this country, but not in the culture that the families came from. So there was a lot of back and forth and learning and some acceptance and some that it was a struggle. But that's one reason why you don't see just this like for like that, okay, Argentina's men's team has won 2 World Cups and they're amazing, and their women's team is only now starting to become a team that you can look at as maybe a contender in South America. The amount of investment wasn't there. The amount of cultural push wasn't there. And it just hasn't gotten the support that it has in this country. You didn't have a Title IX, for example, to push things forward on girls' sport and equal opportunities. So that's just a couple little glimpses at it. But if you look at investment in women's sports worldwide, the U.S. leads the way by a large amount. And if you go back to the early days of the Women's World Cups, the next ones were China, who looked at it as an Olympic sport, and they've always invested heavily in Olympic sport, male, female, across the board. And the Scandinavian countries were always at the forefront of this because they've done that in terms of investing in women's sport. You had Norway as one of the top teams in the world. Sweden is one of the top teams in the world. They were always right there too. Now you're starting to see England catch up. Now you're starting to see Spain and France, and Germany's always been really high up the rank too. But now you're starting to see them go even further. It's a really fascinating thing to see where those old school mentalities of gender roles, of what's acceptable, are breaking down, and now you're seeing high-level women's sport be encouraged and embraced worldwide. And there's still a lot of room to go on it, but it's amazing to watch these old stereotypes break down.
Yeah, and I mean, when you even go back into the last World Cup competition, and the field was expanded, and yes, there were some matches where you had a disparity of talent pool, and there were games that were blowouts and things like that. But when you got to see teams that were there for the first time, and they would actually get a goal on the board, they would actually score, and you would see the excitement and the growth that you hope comes from moments like that for an entire nation. I thought that it adds to this whole dynamic about the growth of the game in and of itself. You know, when you see a Jamaica work their way through with talented players like Bunny Shaw and things like that, it's just to see this progression. I think it's been really great for the game, but there's a lot that has to be tackled for it to continue to grow in a bunch of different countries.
Yeah, a couple of other things about the rosters as people have done our research for us. You can have 4 alternates. One of those alternates has to be a goalkeeper. They are there, but they're not on the roster. They can be replaced. People can be replaced in case of injury, and maybe even only up to a certain point, if I'm not mistaken. Not sure on that. But, yeah, you'll have alternates to somewhat increase that roster size. A lot of great conversation about women's soccer as a whole globally. This is why we love the Twitch pitch. You guys are digging deeper into this and even further into it. It's great. And these are things that they're part of the game. I mean, it's a part of the game that drives the conversation because, in my opinion, the overall game grows if more women are involved in it and their involvement is embraced. I knew it was going to happen, and I looked to see if it would happen, and I was angry when I saw it when on the world feed for Leeds' match a couple weeks ago. I do not remember the commentator. It was somebody I had not heard before. She played for Leeds women's team for a number of years. Calls a lot of games in England on the men's and the women's side. But she was on the world feed that was on, I think it was on Peacock. And I thought she was great. I thought she added a ton of great insight to things. I think it was a hard spot for her to be in because she's a Leeds legend on the women's side, and she was calling the Leeds men's game, and I think she did as good as she could to try to leave the Leeds out of it for her. She did have the accent. There's nothing you can do about that part. But a lot of people were angry about that. Okay, fine. If they're angry about a player being attached to one of the clubs, a former player who is calling that club's game, I can understand that. I get that. But of course, there were a lot of people complaining because it was a woman calling a men's game. Stop that stupid nonsense. Yeah. Good commentators are good commentators, period.
That's Karen Carney?
No, it was somebody else. Okay. It was somebody else.
Okay.
We're not going to play the name that commentator game. It was somebody else.
It was the name that popped into my head on the world feed was I've seen Karen Carney do matches before.
We've seen it before. We see it on the CBS coverage now in the studio. Alex Scott's amazing. There's so many great women involved in the game. I want everybody who is good to be involved in the game. You know, like good is good. I don't care what gender you are. I really don't. Good is good. Yep. Katie Weaver said, I've played pickup in several different countries on different continents and most of the time been the only female involved. Very different environment here in the U.S. It's changing elsewhere, thankfully, and it is starting to. But as Bernd has pointed out, as others have pointed out, it's not there yet. So the U.S. women's national team has that big advantage because they have a wider pool. It's just more accepted for girls to grow up and say, I want to be on the national team. I want to be a professional soccer player in this country. It's starting to change. It's changing in small amounts worldwide, some faster than others, but it's not there yet. At the elite level, yes, there are countries who can compete with the U.S. and can beat the U.S. You go further down, it gets harder to do because you're then talking not about the best 20 players. You're talking about the best 100 players, the best 200 players, and the U.S. is going to be ahead of that for a long, long, long time. Thank you, everybody, talking about this. First off, Soccer for Good OG. I knew you were going to get involved in this. The African women's teams are going to start to grow here very quickly, and Jill points out, and it's a very important thing here in terms of kind of how it's growing. There's a lot of social programs in Africa that use soccer for social good, that address issues like HIV/AIDS, hygiene, education. What's going to happen is a lot of them use soccer to do those things. For example, Soccer in the Streets has used soccer to create employable adults, but you're using soccer. Soccer's the hook. So hopefully, if the coaching is good and everything is going the way it should, you're producing good soccer players. So with these programs in Africa are going to produce soccer players while also addressing the social issues, which is an amazing combination of things. So be on the lookout for that. That's going to be another game changer. We've seen Nigeria have some amazing players over the years. It's only going to grow from here. And it's so exciting to see where we can have the conversations that we have on the men's side when you get a new team in the World Cup and it's exciting and you learn about new countries in the world, you learn about their soccer that you didn't really know before. It's going to be the same on the women's side. You're going to get to know so many more people that are involved, and it's very, very cool. Modaflow says, I try and encourage the girls at the school to play pickup with the boys, and then during practice we kick out all the boys, even siblings, because they tend to be rude. It happens, but that's how people learn, and that's how it changes. And all of you guys who are involved here, I think you understand like how kind of my soccer history has gone with how soccer and using it for good in the world. It's a very valuable tool. And this is another area where soccer can be used for good in areas that have nothing to do with soccer, by the way. But the soccer is also going to improve along the way. And it's just exciting to see. So we will continue these conversations as we go. I can't wait for the Olympic tournament this year because, it's the last World Cup was the best women's World Cup, in my opinion, level, competitiveness, across the board. Yes, you had the U.S.-Thailand game at the beginning of it. You're going to have those as you bring more people to the party because they don't get the competition elsewhere. They don't get the investment if they don't get to a World Cup. We talk about teams getting into the Champions League, for example, and we'll dig into that a little bit here in a minute. It's so lucrative just to get in the door. First time you get in the door, you might get kicked around a little bit. But that money goes into development if it's done correctly. And the next time you come in the door, you can hang. You're better. Argentina was in the 90s, and they were not very good. They finally get back in this last tournament. And look, they were a handful. They made it difficult. We saw it here in She Believes. They need more investment. But, yeah, losing last night 6-0 to the U.S., that needs to spur them on to the next level so next time they play the U.S., they can be more competitive. But then along the way, you can start to knock off of Brazil. You can beat Colombia on a regular basis. You can be the best team in South America. These are all things that are part of that process. I thought this last World Cup was amazing. Now you take an even smaller field into the Olympics. You have that kind of crazy wild card of the Team GB situation, and it could be an amazing tournament. And I can't wait for it. I'm excited to watch all of it.
Absolutely. And, like I said, I'll be glued to it and probably flipping back and forth between as many channels and as many information sources as possible because I want to see how the rest of the world responds with everybody sitting there thinking that the U.S. is one of the favorites. But I want to see how the rest of the world is closing the gap even that much more.
It's going to be exciting to see. We will continue to dig into it both from the soccer for good perspective, but also just in the soccer perspective of how these teams are growing, and also who's going to push the U.S. Who's a medal contender. I mean, right now for me, it is the Netherlands, it is Germany, it is France, it's the U.S. I think those are your semifinalists. I think Team GB is right there. I want to see how it comes together. They would have been probably ahead of France for me. France really disappointed me in the last World Cup. Being at home, I thought they should have done better. I would have had England ahead, but with the turnover, with the Team GB element, I'm going to put them fifth. And I think it's the Netherlands, Germany, France, and the U.S. as your semifinalists in this Olympic tournament. See if that happens. It's going to be fun to watch. Something that we have started to do on the show from time to time is go back in time and have our on this day kind of element. So Here's a little bit of music on this day that we will talk about. Not this song, actually.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait a minute.
I think this is some kind of like match of the day music, I guess. Probably the English folks are yelling at me right now, but that's our sounder for the On This Day segment. And we're going to start with 1943. Legend George Harrison, born on this day in Liverpool, England. You know who George Harrison is, right, John?
Yes, I do.
What is your favorite George Harrison song?
Ooh, Cloud 9 off the solo album.
So you're going to know a lot more of it than I am. I'm going to go super easy and say While My Guitar Gently Weeps. But incredible solo artist, a member of the Traveling Wilburys, and yes, member of the Beatles.
I've heard of them too.
Kind of a big deal. Here's one that I did not know, which is a total throwback to my childhood. 1970, Ernie of Bert and Ernie fame sang Rubber Ducky on Sesame Street. It went from Sesame Street to number 16 on the Hot 100 chart when they released it as a single.
Rubber Ducky, you're the one. Yes.
Was that an Ernie voice or is that a Bert voice? I always mix them up.
I
think it was kind of an amalgamation of the two.
Yeah, it's just having a flashback to when I was a young tot as well.
Rubber Ducky, that's awesome. I didn't know it was actually like a charting single.
I didn't either.
1984, Van Halen's Jump hit number 1 in the U.S., where it stayed for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
One of the most 80s songs of the 80s.
True.
Brought synthesizers to the mainstream in a massive way, and you didn't expect that coming from one of the greatest guitarists of all time in Eddie Van Halen. Soccer for Good OG says, weren't they the same voice doing both characters? It very well could be. So John's amalgamation is probably very historically accurate.
Yeah.
Because I could never remember which one was which. Jump number 1 in 1984, stayed there for 5 weeks. And then this is the one I remember because I remember walking to the mall in Lexington, Kentucky. I lived there for a few years when I was in middle school and the first years of high school. I walked to the mall. It was like through the park behind our house to buy on cassette tape TLC's debut album, Ooh on the TLC Tip. Why are you laughing, John? You don't know TLC?
Well, I know them, but no, just your delivery of the album title.
It's got like 7 or 8 O's in it. I mean, how else are you supposed to say it?
Ooh.
Yeah. Their first single, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, was number 10 on both the pop chart and the R&B chart. I loved that album. I love TLC. They're one of my all-time favorites. ATL representing. That album was brilliant. And we've talked about female empowerment all morning. And that album, that was the first, I think, I'm trying to remember if there was anybody else that was big at that point. The first big female artist out of Atlanta in the hip-hop and R&B world. Kind of flipped it on its head because you had like Crisscross, you'd had Another Bad Creation, you had some things that were going on. Jermaine Dupri was very active at this point, but TLC came in and just flipped it all on its head, and TLC was awesome, incredible. I love that first album. I love pretty much everything they did, to be honest. TLC was awesome, and they released their first album on this day in 1992.
Yeah, and Jeff, for me, gravitating toward Van Halen and Jump and the Adrian Belew style guitar playing of Van Halen there, where instead of it being over-under...
Hold on.
What?
You're using Adrian Belew style guitar playing to talk about Eddie Van Halen?
Well, that's what he did. I mean, instead of playing the standard over-under... Mm-hmm. What he would do is he would do both hands over the top to do all of the high frequency work up and down the shaft of the guitar. Instead of having to straight strum with one hand and then work your chords with the other hand, he would go over the top, and that was how he ended up getting all of the notes coming out faster. Was going over the top with both hands along the neck of the guitar.
But didn't it probably become Eddie Van Halen style playing, because Eddie Van Halen's kind of the GOAT. I think Eddie was first anyway.
Okay, well, I thought Adrian was first, and that was where he got it.
I'm not 100% sure of that, John. And I think Eddie would be ahead of that one in terms of how you remember it.
Okay.
I wouldn't use anybody else's guitar playing to describe Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing.
Okay.
He's kind of good.
He's all right.
Yeah, a little bit. And Thomas DeWin tries to blow my mind with a article at Rolling Stone. He says, since you're talking about music, try to digest this tweet. I see the link, and I see Post Malone, I see Hootie and the Blowfish, and I see Pokemon, and I'm intrigued.
Okay.
And I'm not going to try to digest this because I don't want my head to hurt, but it is a headline of Post Malone covers Hootie and the Blowfish for Pokemon Day celebration. And it's Post Malone covering Only Want to Be With You by Hootie and the Blowfish, and I am not going to listen to it right now because I don't know about that one. I'm not so sure. I've not been the biggest fan of Post Malone. I like Hootie. Back in the day, Hootie and the Blowfish became a punchline for a lot of people, which, hey, when your first album is one of the most successful debut albums of all time, it's going to happen. You can't ever hit that standard again. But I actually liked most of their stuff that wasn't big, which is kind of funny. A couple other things on the music front before we get into some other stuff. Modaflow says Bastille has a few TLC covers. I did not know that. That's pretty cool. I'll have to check that out because I like Bastille, and I did not know they had done some TLC covers. People are angry with your guitar comment. You are a guitar hipster now, according to 4Card.
Okay.
The guitar has a body and a neck.
Thank you.
That's what you're being described. Really cool reference too, Hutcho. I totally agree. Rick Beto, who's an Atlanta music producer, he does some really cool like deep dives into musical things. He'll break down a song, how it came together. He'll break down how pieces of the song came together. Really cool guy. His YouTube is definitely a must follow for this kind of stuff to dig into and go deeper into. You want to nerd out on music and how it's put together? Rick Beto, Beato, is a really good source of it. It's the Pokemon 25th anniversary. It's where you get this Post Malone Hootie and the Blowfish cover and madness. Ragamuffin is all on the cracked rear view front with Hootie and the Blowfish. It's a good album. I like the songs that weren't as big as the others. And I like the second album a whole lot. And their Unplugged was actually really good. Never really got a whole lot of play. They're better than I think the memes kind of would lead you to believe. That's where I'm at with it.
Airborne DJ has corrected me on the Twitters.
Here we go.
Well, he says it's fret tapping when you're doing the rapid arpeggios up top with both hands, and he says that Steve Hackett of Genesis was the pioneer of fret tapping.
Okay. Still think Eddie's taken it and owned it and would be the man that it would be most associated with, unless you're a guitar hipster.
Airborne DJ, please take that up with @Longshoe.
No, both of y'all can say whatever you want. Who's the biggest name here? Eddie Van Halen. Man, I've been told I need to make you angry because it's almost time, so I'm working on it.
True.
Madness. Thomas Chewin says it's the Hootie and the Blowfish cover by Post Malone has Pokemon samples in it. It's strange in a way that I guess is fully expected from Atlanta United fan Post Malone. There are pictures of Post Malone with Atlanta United kits. That's where that's coming from. I don't know if he's actually a fan. It'd be kind of cool if he was. He might be one of those guys that's got like kits of all the teams that he's played in that city, and he might have them like in a bag in his closet somewhere. Or he might really be a fan. I don't know. If he is a fan, hi Post. What's up?
Great to be here in Atlanta.
Yes. That's
all those tour dates that run together. You sit there and it's like, if it's Tuesday, it must be what? Oh, okay.
Yes. Alex Basine says he always felt a closeness to Hootie because the Dolphins make him cry as well.
Yes.
That is accurate. And out of unplugged albums, of course, the Nirvana Unplugged album is the best. And it is the best live televised performance concert I have ever seen and probably will ever see. And yeah, it was mind-blowing. That was before Kurt passed away. I watched that thing over and over and over again when I was in high school. Before that, and then, of course, after that, I watched it over and over and over again. And the last song's heartbreaking. The last song, the scream on Where She Sleeps Tonight, the old Lead Belly song, is goosebumps every single time. All right, we went past our allotted deadline. I don't think I made John sufficiently angry, so the read might suffer. We will see. But it is time for John to tell us about Steve Apolinski right now.
There we go. Apolinski and Associates, LLC, proud supporters of everything soccer down here in the SDH network for wrongful death and serious injury matters. There's only one place you need to go. Apolinski and Associates, LLC, a couple different ways that you can get your questions answered. You can shoot Steve an email, steve@aa-legal.com. You can give them a call, get a free consultation at 404-377-9191, or you can go on the World Wide Web. Large device or small, maybe you can get some fret tapping done there when you're trying to enter in the letters that you need to access Apolinski and Associates, LLC. With that kind of speed, you can go aa-legal.com and tap all your frets. You hit enter, you hit return, you hit the arrow key on your desktop, your laptop, your mobile device. The homepage pops up for Apolinski and Associates, LLC, and a lot of questions are answered there about the firm. But if for some reason you do not have your question answered by looking at the homepage, a pop-up window pops up, because that's what pop-up windows do. They pop up 24/7, 365 and a quarter. You can get your question answered there as well. Recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the top 100 firms in this here state of Georgia. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for their clients in 2 time zones, the Eastern and the Central. Clients in Georgia and Alabama. For wrongful death and serious injury matters, there's only one place you need to go. The website is aa-legal.com.
I like
so you try to get me mad, and I end up getting you mad.
First off, I try to keep the music lower because you've complained about it derailing you, so I try to keep it lower, and then you want to make a comment at the beginning of the read.
Well, I was waiting for it, and I couldn't hear it.
Because it was low, because you usually complain about it messing you up. Modiflow gave you a -1 for that. There we go. Good, I like you, Modiflow. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to read the comments, and I'm just going to go in order. And guitar callback during the read. Watch for derailment. Martha joined this morning just for you, John.
Martha, thank you for joining.
This is going downhill fast. Oh, God, fret tapping in the read is gold.
Topical.
I think Martha was saying you were gold in just the read in general, maybe not this read specifically. Other people would disagree that this read was gold. He went to the fret tapping twice. OMG. No legal elite? That was a question mark. There was some debate on if you said legal elite. Did you say legal elite, John?
Yeah, but I flipped the order of that.
Okay, that might have thrown people off. -1, acknowledging music lead in. -1, guitar talk. -1, timing at the end. -1 in general, a 6.
Okay.
On the flip side, integration of new subject matter into existing, +3. That gave you an 8.5 total. 6.5, meh. Kefsey added other elements to it. A +3 for the Meg, when is the NWSL schedule coming out in the post game from U.S. Women's National Team last night. -1 to you for the duration of the pause on the .com. So you got a 9 out of 10, but a lot of that is down to something that you had nothing to do with.
Me wearing the T-shirt this morning? Being topical?
Sure, but you really didn't have that much to do with it. Let's not get too excited. David says, can we move his nickname to the OMG Nelson? I like that. 7.95, new content made it interesting. PDVIL13, -1 for my heavy breathing. I was actually not heavy breathing. I was holding down the cough button the whole time. I was heavy breathing when I put my hand in my face when he went to the fret tapping reference, but you did not hear that. If you heard any heavy breathing, it was John. I had nothing to do with it. I had the cough button held down. Sean says -1. Here we go is not an appropriate intro to the ad read. -5 fret tapping.
Maybe I was doing a Fabrizio Romano impression.
No, you weren't. -5 fret tapping. Where is this going? I'm confused. -1 did not thank Chris. -2 way too fast. By far the worst read from the East German judge. 1.8905.
Okay.
You got to go ahead.
I was going to say no. Tom Russo has joined in. He says, "Damn, almost great. 7 +2 for the fret tapping. Callback -1.5 for the long delay at the end."
Okay. Sounding good. Somebody said. I'm waiting for their score to see where they gave you. You got a 7. You got a 6. The pace seemed to really speed up after the time zone. 7-point rock and roll is the score. Ricky just missed the read. Sorry, Ricky. Modiflow, I feel frettened out of 10. I don't know what that means. Nick Leafy said I was heavy breathing during the read. I was holding down the cough button.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I slipped my... I don't know. I thought I was heavy. I thought I was holding it down.
Evil cough button.
Maybe. I mean, when he started talking about fret tapping, I'm sure all of y'all were freaking out too, because I was. I didn't know where that thing was going to go. Nick gave you an 8.5. He gave a +1 for the heavy breathing to get it to a 9.5. Double A5, 8.869. I like this version. Abby is at a drive-through at the pickup window. Missed most part of the visual part and part of the audio. So you get a pass from Abby, you get a 9. Because she missed most of it.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Wow, that's where we are in scoring these days. I have to thank 4Card first for renewing the subscription on Twitch. You demand.
Thank you, 4Card.
Outside of the tapping, you did pretty good, going with a 6. A 5.9 is what it felt like today. A 7 from the central time zone of Huntsville, Alabama. PTVIL13 said, "Sorry, the heavy breathing I heard was my dog. Oops." Well, Nick heard your dog too, I guess. So I don't know what's going on.
Wow. Fantastic dog.
I don't know. Yes, people are giving out passes for the read for John's shirt, and because they're not hearing anything and all this. And Ragamuffin, no, don't feel bad for Steve Apolinski. This is actually a lot of good publicity for Steve Apolinski. So a lot of people know who Steve Apolinski is now because of John's read.
Yep.
We will try to get Steve on the show, Sean. We will do our best. More audio problems. Yeah, probably.
Maybe we should have Steve do the read one day. Have him come on at the top of the hour and do a read.
We'll see what we can pull off. Steve's a very busy man, but we'll see what we can pull off. All right. Man, hectic day so far. We've talked a lot about the women's game. We have talked about the musical elements of On This Day. Let's jump into actual soccer matches on the field. On the men's front yesterday in the Champions League, Pep Guardiola was happy, I guess, but not ecstatic. He said his team has to be more clinical. They were dominant over Mönchengladbach. I mean, that's not a surprise. He wanted them to be more clinical. He said, in general, we controlled the game. Unfortunately, we were not clinical enough up front. That is something we have to improve in this competition. Up front, we have to be more clinical. In this competition, you have to be perfect to make sure you go through. They were not perfect, but they were pretty good.
And once again, you're dealing with rotated sides, and you're seeing what Gundogan and Cancelo and Diaz are all about. And it's just...
How rotated is that?
No. But what I'm saying is, it's from the match that was in the Premier League. You sat out Rodri, you sat out Kyle
people.
Walker, you rested all those guys.
This was not rotated.
No. You bring them in for the guys who are absent from the Premier League match. You bring them into the Champions League match.
Yeah, this is the first choice.
Yeah, and this is what you want. And I think that if you're Pep Guardiola, you say things like this because you're still striving towards something. You don't want to sit there and have the guys get complacent. It's like, okay, we got a first leg result that we're looking for. You don't want any kind of complacency because there's still a lot of work to do in the tournament.
You're striving to win the trophy, period, because you haven't yet. It's that simple. And Yeah, he's right. I mean, you can't have slip-ups. You can't have that bad day at the office where you're not finishing, you're not clinical in the final third. That's what it's going to take. I mean, that's the message after a game like this, because there's not much else to take out of it. I mean, Mönchengladbach was a distant second in terms of quality in this one. 3 shots for them, 1 shot on target. They had 39% of the ball. They created 1 big chance. They didn't really disrupt Manchester City, who passed at 92%, which is an absurd number in a game at this level. They just weren't in it, you know. Manchester City did get a goal, in the 29th minute? I mean, I guess you could say they needed one earlier to open this thing up a little more. It's a beautiful goal, the opener. Bernardo Silva on the cross from Cancelo. Easily the better team. And everybody else is renewing their subscriptions as well. Ricky and Sam, you guys rock as well. Very cool. Manchester City's going to be through. They're fine. They are, at this point, although Bayern Munich's performance maybe puts them back as the favorite, as the defending champs, but Manchester City's right there if they can continue this level of play. Now, we got to talk about the other game in Champions League, Atalanta and Real Madrid, because there's a bit of controversy in it. Real Madrid ends up winning on an 86th minute goal from Ferland Mendy. Beautiful goal. Red card in the 17th minute to Atalanta. So they were playing a man down. That absolutely wrecked the game plan. Real Madrid had 69% of possession. Atalanta 2 shots. They didn't force a save. That is very un-Atalanta kind of numbers. And they had a lot to say about it. So... Well, I mean, but this is the thing. In the general media around the game, it's pretty bland. You know, Ferland Mendy scored a stunning late winner. Real Madrid looked like it was being frustrated by a well-organized home side until the goal. Remo Freuler was sent off at just 17 minutes for denying a clear goal-scoring opportunity. The depleted host didn't have a single shot on target. Blah, blah, blah. It sounds very beige. The Italian newspapers had more to say about it. La Gazzetta dello Sport said that the red card changed the whole game. They didn't agree with the decision. They said the Frenchman only faced the attacker only faced Pierluigi Golini, but seems to be going away from goal, which is a very important element here. Is it an obvious goal-scoring opportunity if he's not going towards goal? Tutto Sport said the red card was excessive and left Gasparini's men outnumbered, the most obvious mistake on a low-spirited evening. Corriere dello Sport said that Steeler, the referee, didn't make the most of his opportunity at the elite in Europe, pointing at several errors in the game, and of course discussed the red card. They wrote that unconvincing, especially on the disciplinary, and leaves the unpleasant feeling of understanding which way the wind is blowing. That's a great line. Man, I'm going to have to steal that. Thank you, Corriere dello Sport. Gianpiero Gasparini, the manager of Atalanta, he did not stay out of this party. He had a lot to say about it. These are some of the quotes that he had to say about the decision and about the way this game went. They're trying to remove any contact. That's suicide for the sport. Gasparini, I disagree, Meester. This was a foul. Let's not get it twisted.
Yeah.
This is a foul. There's no way around it. I mean, he hip checks him. It's obviously a foul. So the idea about contact and you can't have contact, any of that, thoroughly disagree. Yeah. The question is, was it dogso? Was it denying an obvious goal-scoring opportunity? Gasparini had more to say. The game was ruined about the red card. Last season, after absolute chaos, the handball rule was sorted out. Now we have the temptation to remove any form of contact in football, and that is suicide for the sport. Again, I disagree with that idea. Gasparini said, I just got banned for saying something in Serie A. If I say something now, then UEFA will ban me for a month. But this is football suicide. We cannot have referees who never played the game and don't know the difference between a challenge and a foul. If they can't tell the difference, then they ought to go and get a different job, frankly. They should get people who played football to referee instead. I do agree with that. That would actually be a good thing and needs to happen more. And it's not easy to happen the way the referee system is structured worldwide. That is an important element. I think you can tell, not so much in something like this. I think he's stretching it. But in terms of game management, you can tell people who have been around the game more and been involved in the game more in the way they manage it, because they understand a controversial call that you might have got 100% right, but it's controversial. People are going to be angry, and they're going to vent. And you let them vent, and you don't just start throwing cards around willy-nilly. Like, you know, all right, they're going to be ticked off. I'm going to let them have their moment. Okay, cool. Can we play now? Let's go.
Yeah.
You like to have that, so you like people who've been involved in the game. It's just tough with the way the referee structures this. You're not going to get a lot of former players who then, high-level players, go into refereeing. Maybe it's something that where we see players who don't make it out of academies, maybe national federations need to go to those academies and say, hey, those 17, 18, 19-year-olds that don't get those pro deals, let's get them into referee development. Let's start them here. Let's get them involved, because then we'll have better referees. Gasparini continued. Referees also have video replays now. They have everything needed to judge, and yet even with replays, they get it wrong, because they're humans, but yes. You wait so long for this event, and then it gets ruined. We might have lost anyway. I'm not complaining about the result, but we at least could have played our game. Okay, so I'm going to pull up a tweet that has the video of the full incident, because I thoroughly disagree with Gasparini in the idea that the contact issue. It's a foul to me every day of the week in any league in the world.
Agreed.
The question is, was it denying an obvious goal-scoring opportunity? That's what it comes down to. And I'm going to pull that up on Twitch, and we're going to talk over it and kind of talk through it. So if you're listening on the app, you're not going to see this part, obviously, but I'll try to explain it. So it's combination play through the middle for Real Madrid. You get the runner, defender comes over and is late, and it's a foul. I think there's just no question about the foul element of it. He doesn't get to the ball. He throws his hip into Mendy. It's a foul. Mm-hmm. There's zero issue with the foul for me. The issue is the red card. And on the video, it's right after the foul. Everybody's arguing. Everybody knows what can be coming here. The foul is obvious. So I think Gasparini kind of shoots himself in the foot with his argument. He should be arguing about, was the play going to goal? Was it an obvious goal-scoring opportunity? His touch is not going directly to goal, you can see on that angle. You also see another player to the right of the defender if you go back to the big full shot, and we'll rerun it one more time. There's another player really close that with that first touch going not towards goal but away from goal, and another player in the vicinity, I think that it is not denying an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. I really do. And that's frustrating. I mean, if you are... Muted. Okay. So, we're going to watch it one more time and talk through it. What I want you to zero in on in this part right here is the defender coming from behind, but also the defender who is on the back post. I don't think it's an easy call. It's a 50-50 to me. Like, you have to make a judgment if you're the referee. It's not about the contact. It's about, is it at that point an obvious goal-scoring opportunity? The touch away from goal diminishes that to me. Doesn't erase it, but diminishes it. You know, and you're not then continuing on to the rest of it. He's got to come back to goal, and that player coming in from behind that would be between the ball and the goal is what makes that difficult for me, because that's a heavy touch away from goal that draws the contact. He's got to get to the end of that, and he's going to have to settle it because he's not going to have an angle and take a shot. I think that other defender there makes it a less obvious goal-scoring opportunity. It's not cut and dried any which way. It's not simple to call. It is a judgment. You could have given a yellow. Absolutely. You could have given a yellow because it's not cut and dried. You could have given a yellow because of where it is in the game, which I know the rule book doesn't tell you, well, if a foul like this happens in the first half, then it is not a red card. But if it happens in the 60th minute or later, it is a red card. No. But I'll go back to a quote that Mark Geiger has used in referee education classes that I love. It's a book. It's not a book with a hard cover. You can bend it to fit the game. This game would have been better without the red card. It would have been better. Strummer John likes it. We actually pulled in some video. I'm working on new things, Strummer. I'm working on it. The show's becoming a very Twitch-driven thing, so I'm trying to work on adding new video and stuff. As I learn new tricks, you guys will get to see them, and we'll go from there.
2021 is so fancy.
The birds come chirping in, and I know Jarrett's here.
Yes.
What's up, Jarrett?
Yeah. Not a lot. Taking in all the chaos of Europe, taking in all the transfers and potential transfers of MLS, just sitting kind of in the eye of the hurricane of it all and watching it all unfold and hoping I don't get hit with the debris of transfer madness and rumor madness.
Oh, you will. We'll get there in a second.
That's fine.
Yes, we will definitely get there in a second. But anyway, this is a really tough call. If it is not definitive in that moment of the game, I don't want to see a red there.
No.
I don't. And it wasn't to me. I do understand the arguments both ways, and that's why it's a tough call. I agree with Gasparini in that it changed the way that his team had to play, and they played great in changing that and almost saw it out to get a draw. They conceded a late goal. They're absolutely in it in the second leg. They got to go on the road. They got to score goals, but they're in it. It's a tough call. Burns says yellow is the correct call and expected by the defenders as well. A lot of that's down to the moment of the match. Being that early, being the stature of the match, you would not expect that red card there. It just wasn't definitive enough for me to be a red. Yeah. And that's tough. That's really, really tough. Atalanta did really, really well with this, and they should take a lot of positives out of it. I wish Gasparini had left the idea that it's not even a foul out of it. It's a foul. The contact issue, I mean, stop. It's a foul. He hip checks him. He's late to it. You have to call a foul. You don't have to go red. That's the point that is there for me. The other game in Europe yesterday, we saw Dele Alli do very nice things. We saw Gareth Bale do really nice things. Where has this Tottenham Hotspur been? They were fun. They were fun. Bicycle kicks from Dele Alli, great, first-time shots from Gareth Bale. Amazing stuff. Jose Mourinho talked about Dele Alli, and he said he had a difficult period with an injury and with talk about whether he would stay or leave. Then the transfer market closed, and he started working with lots of motivation, and it's coming. These are questions I love to answer because he is playing very, very well. The goal was beautiful, but for me, the assists and the hard work for the team mean more for me and makes me really happy. Are we going to see more Dele Alli going forward?
I would think. I think that you're going to see more Dele Alli. I think that you might even see more Gareth Bale because,
let's not get crazy here, John.
I know.
He'd rather be on the golf course. We know this.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, that is true.
Or playing for
I don't
Wales.
know what his handicap is, by the way. But no, I think
he's pretty good, actually, from what I've heard.
But if you're going to try and ride the hot hand in both Europa and in the Premier League to try to improve your standing, I think that you have to see more Dele Alli and Gareth Bale, don't you?
I would think so if they're in this kind of form, especially Dele Alli. You need that creativity. Ton of Europa League today, and we will run through some of the highlights quickly. You do have the Golasso show on CBS, All Access, not quite Paramount Plus yet. And we got some news about them too. We'll get into that.
Folks are asking.
And we'll get into your thoughts and questions on games from Europe yesterday. If you got them, throw them in on Twitter, throw them in on the Twitch pitch. I am going to stop the Twitch pitch right here, and we will get to those questions in just a second. So your early games, you've got Hoffenheim hosting Molde. You've got Ajax hosting Lille, which is a good one. You've got Arsenal hosting Benfica, which is a really good one. You have a very desperate Napoli side hosting Granada, and it might be Gennaro Gattuso's last game. If they get knocked out here, they trail 2-0 going back home. to the Diego Maradona Stadium, and we'll see if that gives them a boost. Rangers hosting Royal Antwerp, Shakhtar Donetsk hosting Maccabi Tel Aviv, and Villarreal hosting Red Bull Salzburg, which is an interesting one because Red Bull Salzburg not so good in game number 1, and now they got to go to Spain, and they also, Jarrett Smith, have to at least pay attention to one Packy Bonner, one James McFadden, Celtic and Scotland legends who have tipped Jesse Marsh for the Celtic job. Jarrett Smith, Celtic correspondent, what do you think about this? Where are the birds?
Oh, my God in heaven.
You're that excited.
I didn't come here to do this. I came here to talk about Europa League. And
no, you walked right in.
Not to drag people back into my hell that I choose to live in. A coach who dominates his league and struggles in Europe tracks pretty well for Celtic, to be fair. Ever since the Martin O'Neill days. Don't do it. You seem to have a pretty good roadmap for yourself in the Red Bull system. Stick with that.
You might think that, but if they go out to Villarreal, that roadmap might get torn up. That destination that you inputted into Google Maps, it might become unknown. They could move on.
The only humorous part about this to me is if he does it, and then American fans have to force themselves to watch like a midweek match of Celtic at Kilmarnock, because it takes a certain level of degenerate to do that willingly. And I'm happy to drag. The same thing with Tim Weah was there on loan. I'm happy to drag people into my hell. It doesn't bother me one bit. But I think Jesse Marsh is better than this, even if it hasn't gone perfectly for him right now. I think he's better than this situation.
I don't know. Now, the board situation at Celtic, I know there's a lot of
the front office situation is deeper than manager. This is the manager was the scab covering up the tumor. So
Neil Lennon was a little bit more than that, in my opinion.
This is a bigger problem than just manager. So
it is, and it definitely.
I hope Jesse Marsh does turn it around though with this tie.
It definitely factors into should he take that job if it would be offered to him. But I'm not so sure that it might not be a good spot for him, because I don't see him. And look, maybe I'm being harsh, but he didn't show well in big games with New York. He has not necessarily shown well in big games in Europe with Salzburg. He's not going to go to Leipzig.
No.
And there's nowhere else to go in the Red Bull. You're not going to go backwards. I mean, that would be pointless. I don't know if Salzburg is going to continue on this. They might say, you know what, we'll go get the next up-and-coming guy and see if they can do better in these big moments. Celtic would not be a bad landing spot at all for Jesse Marsh if that becomes the possibility, and he would actually come in with a mentality and an idea of the game that would be rooted in something after 2003, which would be an upgrade for Celtic. So I think it actually could be a win across the board. Now, he would probably want to ask those questions about the board and make sure he's going to get supported properly, but I'm not as negative about it. The reason why this came up with Pat Bonner, legendary goalkeeper, and why it's being talked about, and it was on the Sport Sound podcast, is where they were both full of praise for Marsh. Both of them encountered Marsh doing pro-license coaching training, and they were blown away by Marsh's mentality and the way he sees the game. So it is purely about his philosophy and the way he sees the game, and they encountered it from coaching education situations. So that's pretty interesting to me. I don't think it's a bad fit for anybody involved, honestly, outside of the board issues at Celtic. That's the one that would be the concern. If you have questions about it, Jarrett can answer those. We'll get to those really quickly. The other games today in Europa League. Yes, angrily as well. But you got nice chirping birds. That should make you feel better. Leverkusen hosting Young Boys, which you need to watch. That game's going to be bonkers. It's going to be drunk and stupid and crazy. The first time was crazy. Can it be crazier? I hope so.
Watch Rangers and Antwerp. They had
That's
7
the
goals.
first
They
game.
had 10.
That's the first game. You watch that one first. Then you watch Leverkusen and Young Boys at 3 o'clock. You have the doubleheader of drunkenness. You have a game in Belgium where Dynamo Kiev is going to face who?
Brugge.
Thank you. Dinamo Zagreb hosting Krasnodar, Leicester hosting Slavia Prague. That was scoreless in game 1, correct?
Yep.
Leicester should be fine. Manchester United or their B team or their C team or their U12s will be playing Real Sociedad. They have a 4-0 lead in that. They should not risk anybody. Milan and Red Star. I'm curious to see how much Milan goes for this or if they put all of their eggs in the Serie A basket going forward. I want to see that lineup when it comes out. PSV hosting Olympiacos, Roma hosting Sporting Braga. That is your Europa League. You can do the wraparound shows in Spanish, Zona Football, on the 2DN networks. Is that online for Zona Football, or is that on one of the channels?
That is online. You have to have it's on Xfinity. If you have Xfinity,
you have to have a subscription to 2DN to watch it online. Xfinity incorporates it. I think Fubo incorporates it in as well. You can also watch it on the CBS Sports Network, on your cable packages or your streaming packages, and you can watch the games on CBS All Access. European questions, John. What do we have on Twitter?
European questions. Do we have any European questions?
Maybe not. We'll move on. Katie Weaver said, did Jose have to get sad and weird for Dele and Bale to live? Yes, I think he did. I agree. So. Strummer says Bale doesn't train, so he's just creative. That's also true. He's out on the golf course instead, or he's not fit. I still don't understand this stuff. Spurs maybe should move to Austria. They would be more competitive. That's not necessarily wrong. That is very mean, though, Ragamuffin. Four Card says if he wants to save his job, then Jose Mourinho will play Dele Alli. I agree, too. Sean Vergara is going to be looking for Gareth Bale on the golf course in Vegas. I don't know if he'll be able to get to Vegas anytime soon, but we'll see. Let's see. Nick Alifi on that situation with Atalanta and Real Madrid. Nick said, I'm usually team defense, but the posture of the defender who made the challenge looked more cynical than it actually was. If the defender goes to ground as well, it gives the impression it was two guys fighting for the ball. Should have been a yellow, but I get it. See, I'm just purely on the goal-scoring opportunity side, where that's not clear to me, because that's why it should be a red. I don't think the challenge was red card worthy. I think it's the dog-so element that could make it red. I just don't think it's fully clear. I really don't. To give you a sense of Tottenham's opponent, Wolfsberger from Austria, their transfer market valuation of the roster is $15 million. That's about a quarter of Atlanta United's, and that's a whole lot less than a quarter of Tottenham's. So, yes, 8-1 in aggregate, about what it should be. Strummer about Bale and Dele Alli. You need the scoring. That's been the problem. You need someone to alleviate the pressure on Son and Kane. Can you play all four of them as your front four? I'd like to see him try. I don't know if Jose would, because he's afraid of risking anything. So, Nick Alifi is not positive about Milan's chances today. He was asked how he's feeling, and not great is the response. Four Card says Milan should go all in on Europa League. Serie A might be slipping away.
They're minus 217 today against Red Star. Red Star is north of plus 600.
Yeah, but what's that one on aggregate? Because it's not just about the result today.
Yeah. Let's see. Last time out, it was 1-0.
Red Star, right?
Wait a second. Where am I looking? I lost it.
It was 2-2. Thank you. It was 2-2 in that first game at Red Star. So Milan has the 2 away goals. I don't know why Nick's so negative, except Nick is generally negative.
2-2. There it is. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
I just said that. But anyway. Okay. I think they'll be okay, but I think they've got to look at the Serie A table And that's the challenge if you're Milan and you start worrying about should you go for this, should you not go for this? Because it's not just winning the title, it's finishing top 4.
Yeah.
They've got a 6-point cushion on Atalanta to finish top 4. 15 games left. They got to be careful about that. Do they want 2 more games in Europe? Do they want 2 more games in the Europa League? Do they care about the Europa League enough? I don't know. I'm curious to see that lineup. I don't think they punt, but I don't know if they risk a whole lot either. Burned, back to you, Jarrett, says, I don't think the Red Bull organization would shed many tears if Jesse Marsch moved to Celtic.
Am I just too high on Jesse Marsch then?
No, I think it's just the...
Or is that just a Red Bull thing?
I think it's a little bit of all of the above. I don't think you're too high on Jesse Marsch. I think he's a good manager, but he has done well in terms of developing a system. He's done well in terms of winning leagues, which, hey, Celtic loves that, so that's not a problem. He hasn't done well in knockout play. And look, if you're Red Bull Salzburg, if you were in MLS, for example, you win the title on knockout play. So, yeah, you're kind of stuck. Those supporter shields, those banners are really nice, but do they really mean a whole lot? No. At Salzburg, you win the Austrian title. It's almost expected at this point. It's about progressing in Europe because you need that money. The money coming in from Europe is critical. At Celtic, the money coming in from Europe is great, but I think if Jesse Marsch came in and won 10 league titles in a row, y'all would be fine, right?
Yeah, and you know who can't play in that system, Jason? Scott Brown.
Jesse Marsch to Celtic. Let's go. Come on. Let's make it happen.
Scott Brown can't play in that system anymore.
Put him on TV.
He'd have been brilliant in that system. 6-7 years ago, he'd have been a monster in that system.
Let's go. Put him on TV. Let him run his smack talk on TV. Let's get him off the field because it's sad to watch.
That's honestly the thing that happens in Scotland is once you're done playing, you become a pundit.
Yeah, that's fine.
Chris Boyd, Chris Commons. It's just what they do. But maybe I am like too high. I don't know. Maybe I'm.
No, I don't think you are
too high on Marsch. On Marsch in general, that I think he can do better than that organization, which is just a mess. So
maybe
Burns' word for it though, and maybe he. I don't know where he needs to go. Maybe it's not Scotland though. Maybe it is.
Maybe it's Germany. Maybe it's
Germany.
Maybe it's mid-tier. I don't think you're too high on him though. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's hard to draw the line of a move from Red Bull Salzburg to Celtic. I don't think it's up. Exactly. I don't think it's a move down at all.
It's just different.
I don't think it's sideways exactly. It's a weird one. I think he would fit really, really well at Celtic, and I think he would probably be paid very well, and I think he'd have all the materials to win league after league after league. And the pressure in terms of the European side of it would be lesser than it is at Red Bull Salzburg, and I think he could develop that side of his work. And Byrne has a point. Byrne says, I think personally Marsch would need a real strong tactician as an assistant. He's a good motivator. He connects with young players, but tactically he's weak. He needs a Hansi Flick style assistant. I'll go a little bit of a step further. I think Marsch is really good at implementing a style of play, but in-game tactics, preparation for a game, this is something that puts Pep over the top because he's got a great team around him, but also he's a maniac when it comes to it. This is something you're going to see with Gabriel Heinze here in Atlanta, who really studies the opposition, and he's ready for anything they can throw at him. This is something that Jose Mourinho has hung his hat on, and still is really the only thing he hangs his hat on at this point, is he knows everything the opposition's going to do. That's where it feels like Marsch is weakest, in these knockout games where it so often comes down to, okay, the game is at this point, it's close. I know they're going to bring on this player at this minute, and they're going to change to this kind of system because they're going to go for it because that's what they did the last 5 times they did it, and now I'm ready for it. Or this is what I need to do to break this team down because this is what they have had problems with. I think that's where Jesse Marsch struggles. it's like we've talked about in American sports, and you see it the conversation right now around Lloyd Pierce with the Hawks. Like he needs an assistant who will help him manage the timeouts and when to stop the play, stop the run that the opposition has, those kinds of things. We see it in American football where you need that like game manager guy to help the coach do those things. So Jesse Marsh, I think, needs the equivalent of that. He needs that preparation, that tactical prep guy. He needs what Pep had it with Dome Turan as an example, and what Pep has now with Juan Malillo. He needs those kinds of guys around him, and I don't think he's built out his staff to that degree yet.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Sam Williamson's comment, Jarrett? Jim Curtin would be a good hire at Celtic.
You're just trying to don't do this, because all you're trying to do at this point is to make sure that I get viciously murdered by Philadelphia fans.
I was going to say, Rich Ransom and Perfect Tommy will be coming in here in 3, 2, 1.
Like,
accurate.
At some point, Conti's going to show up at my door with a knife.
Oh,
just
no.
on principle, because
No.
it's Philadelphia.
No, you're okay.
I'm not. It's going to be the most like no hard feelings attack ever. But like, it's just I mean, what's next? Y'all going to get Hugh? You get Big Hugh in here too on me?
Now
Man's forearms are bigger than my head.
He would do it just out of principle because I think he'd enjoy it.
Because he's petty, and I appreciate it.
Yes, he would. He would absolutely enjoy it.
All that Eagles stuff that just comes bubbling up. You got to protect Philly here.
The first time I ever worked with somebody who I looked at and went, "My God, I can't imagine anyone that large hitting another human being."
Accurate. Bernd will be very happy when John's favorite Belgian club exits the Europa League. Me too.
They're going to play in the final.
No,
out of principle.
I am totally rooting against them. Sorry, Ethan Horvath. I apologize. Let's go, Dynamo Kiev. I think both Brugge's missing like a whole bunch of players, so I don't know. Maybe
like seven. Their offense,
most of their attack. Their attack is beheaded, according to one fan on Reddit. Horvath is in goal because Mignolet is tested positive for COVID. Let's go, Dynamo Kiev. Come on. Knock these guys out.
I mean, I'm curious, what are the numbers on this game? Because this is an Eastern Bloc country involved here. Are we going to get like another red flag, odds situation that we need to be aware of?
That's what I just heard when Jarrett was talking.
Kiev is a plus 276. Brugge is a plus 108. And your draw is a plus 242.
See, this is fine. Just let the chips fall where they may then.
Yeah.
In this instance.
I'll throw a juice box on Dynamo Kiev.
1-1 draw.
So you just do that in spite, though.
I'm throwing an optimistic juice box on Dynamo Kiev just because I don't want to hear about this club anymore and hear John talk about them. That's all.
Just wait till next year.
I know they'll be back. I know.
All of the home teams are favorites in the Europa League matchups today, ranging from a couple of teams on the plus side to minus 370 with Hoffenheim at home.
Okay. Last comments on the Twitch pitch in our European theater of commentary. Nick Alifi says Milan needs to stay top 4. Margins too narrow for mistakes. Get out of Europe and focus on keeping a Champions League spot. It's kind of where my gut is too. It's like you can't throw it, but yeah, you're not going to really cry too much if you get knocked out by Red Star today.
Now, couple on Twitter before we get out of European football. Antino says all this time they build Foden as the David Silva replacement, and it's actually Joao Cancelo. And then the question from Ropes, where does Carlo Ancelotti fit in the coaching lineage? It seems like Everton does not do as much building up from the back. I'm just curious.
He's kind of his own thing. I mean, Carlo is a chameleon as a coach, and I think that's what's made him so unique and special is that he, for so long, was the guy who would follow somebody and be able to keep the train on track. You know, he's really good with players. I think players will run through walls for him. They love him. Tactically, I mean, he will adjust to what he has, and he'll adjust to what the team is, and he'll put his own individual spin on, like, I like this guy here, I like that guy. But he's not like an ideologue when it comes to management and tactics and philosophy. He will adjust. So I think he's a little unique in that. I mean, he's obviously got the classic Italian coaching heritage, but he'll deviate from that when the situation calls for it. He just will do what it takes to win. I mean, it's pragmatism in a non-negative sense. It is taking what you have and making the best of it. It's not being defensive, which is how pragmatic usually gets used when it talks about managers, but he just adapts. I think he's kind of a unique guy in that coaching lineage. Anything else on Twitter, John?
Not from European stuff,
okay.
But the next big topic has a Twitter question.
Okay, you don't even know what the next big topic is. I might surprise you.
Okay.
We'll see. Perfect Tommy says, how about Marcelo Gallardo to Tottenham to replace Jose? I like it. I actually really do like it. I think he would fit.
Well, I mean, we've been trying to pinpoint where Gallardo is going to go for a while, and I'm here for it all.
Yeah, I don't think that's it. I think he probably goes elsewhere, but that would be a good one because he tries to play good football. He tries to play exciting football, attacking football. That's what Tottenham has generally hung their hat on before they brought in Jose. Yeah, it would make a lot of sense. I don't know if Daniel Levy will go out on that limb, though. I'd love to see him do it. It'd be a bold move. I think it'd be a great move. And Tottenham does have historical links to Argentina. You go back in the day to Osvaldo Ardiles. You go back to Ricky Villa. And, yeah, they've done that back in the day. So it would be embraced in a way going back to their roots. They could play off of that. That'd be fascinating. I love that idea, Tommy. I don't see it happening because I think Gallardo will go somewhere else, and I don't think Tottenham will be that bold, but they should be. I really like that. Man, now I got to think deeper on that one. That's good stuff. YouTube has said Total Soccer Show, and I did not hear this segment. They did one about overrating Jesse Marsch within the last couple of days. Basically, they said it's sort of an incomplete grade on the competitive side due to the competitive imbalance, talking about Austria. Seems to be doing well bringing players through. Not sure how much I describe either to the manager versus the club structure, both at Salzburg and Red Bull as a whole. I'm just purely on, I think he has gotten too much wrong in big games, and that's a problem because ultimately you've got to win those games. Some clubs are in situations where those big games, those knockout games, are more important. MLS clubs it is, because that's how you win the title. For Salzburg, it's European placement and moving forward in Europe that is critical, and you've got to win those games. For somebody like Celtic, it's not quite as important, so it might be an even better fit. Okay, we got a ton of other things to talk about. What is the next big topic, John?
Well, the one that's over your shoulder that we haven't talked about yet. TV news. Mr. Fantastic wanted to know what our thoughts were about the announcement yesterday from our friends at the Mountain. What are the thoughts on the big news about Paramount Plus adding a large amount of soccer content and new leagues? Could it be a move MLS possibly make to the network after 2022? And would it be a great investment?
And boom goes the dynamite.
It did it there up front because they went all in on what they could go all in on right now, and nobody saw it coming. So Paramount, CBS All Access, March 4th, CBS All Access becomes Paramount Plus. You don't have to go subscribe to something new if you're already a CBS All Access subscriber. They've already got NWSL. They've already got UEFA Champions League, Europa League. They're going to have the new Conference League that starts next year. They have been picking up the Women's Champions League games, although that's been sold differently, so they don't own that package, but they've been picking games up as they've been able to. It's just structured completely differently. I hope UEFA cleans that up. They announced yesterday at the investor event that the CONCACAF Nations League Final Four in June will be with Paramount Plus. And I don't know, and this is the thing that there's no way to know yet, I don't know which of this stuff will go to a CBS property as well. Like, are they going to throw it on CBS Big Time? Are they going to throw it on CBS Sports Network to grow that? Is it purely on Paramount Plus? Don't know. It's way too early. So hold that element. Nations League for CONCACAF goes to Paramount Plus. World Cup qualifying for the 2022 tournament. Every match except for the U.S. home games and its game in Mexico So the U.S. game in Mexico is not part of this. The U.S. home games are not part of this. They're already sold. Everything else in CONCACAF's final round of qualifying, the octagonal, is going to Paramount Plus. Now, I had heard all the games in Mexico were not going to Paramount Plus, but the article here from Soccer America was that only the U.S. game in Mexico is not going to Paramount Plus. That's been sold. So we'll see where that discrepancy is. But pretty much all of World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF is going to be on Paramount Plus. So now those U.S. games on the road that were always hard to get, you can watch them on Paramount Plus or a CBS property. Women's World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF, everything goes to Paramount Plus. The Argentine Liga Profesional de Fútbol starting in July, which will be the second half of the year competition, the 25-game format where you play everybody once. That is going to Paramount Plus. So the current one, and I don't know how this is going to go, and this is a big question mark. Is it exclusive to Paramount Plus, or is Paramount Plus doing it in English? Does the Spanish language stay with TIC and Fanatis? Don't know. Don't know that yet. The last time that the Argentine League was broadcast in the United States in English was on Fox Soccer Channel, and they did only a handful of games in English. So let's see where that goes. But they will have everything from the Liga Profesional de Fútbol, and I don't know for how long. It starts in July with this competition in the second half of the year. It says more than 300 matches a year streamed on Paramount Plus. Also, the Brasileiro Serie A, that's going in May. The next competition, that finishes up tonight. We'll talk about that here in a minute. That's going to Paramount Plus. And it's same thing. I don't know if it's the English language rights or all of it going to Paramount Plus. Are they going to show the games in Portuguese on Paramount Plus? I don't know, because that's how it's broadcast right now on Fanatis. I don't know if they keep the Portuguese and the English language goes to Brazil, which has never been sold. I think the last time it was on US TV was on Gold TV back like 15 years ago. Also, and this is the element that maybe goes after Mr. Fantastic's question, CBS Sports is reported by Soccer America to be in the hunt for Serie A rights, which ESPN holds through right now, this season. The end of this season, the ESPN deal is up. Paramount Plus, CBS Sports are reportedly going after those. I have not seen a direct link to them going after the MLS rights, but you would have to assume with them going after CONCACAF and these other properties that they would be in the mix for the MLS package, at least some portion of it. When that comes up for bid at the end of the 22 season, the bidding, I think, actually starts in 2022.
You want a breaking news sounder?
Yes, let's do a breaking news sounder.
Go for it, Jared.
No, John, you do it. You're the Canada man. Do it.
Breaking news from Montreal, John.
Thierry Henry stepping down as head coach for family reasons from CF Montreal.
Wow. And it sounded like he was going to stay in Montreal because Bournemouth had went into a different direction. They had requested permission to speak to Thierry Henry. It sounds like that was denied. Bournemouth ended up going with Jonathan Woodgate for the rest of the season.
Yep.
Thought, okay, Henry's staying. Now he is not. He is stepping down right before training camp opens up for Club de Foot Montreal. Wow.
Ooh, and that right there is the wild part. Is like it is just before preseason. Like I hope everything's okay in his personal life.
Yes.
Like I hope that everyone's good to go in the family, and it's not something like tragically dramatic. Because damn, like I genuinely hope this is him just. I hope this is him just jumping ship, a la Tommy Tuberville at dinner with the recruits when he took the Cincinnati job, kind of thing. Because I hope it's not him having to step away for something horrible. I hope it's just him stepping away.
Jared, before the speculation continues, Brian Sharetta, great resource here. He tweets that citing family reasons due to the pandemic forcing him to be separated from his kids. They're not going to be in Montreal. I guess they're not going to, whatever Montreal's going to do, they're not going to take families with them. I don't think it's anything more than that, which is
cool.
A massive
That's
issue.
Fine.
Yeah, I didn't want to continue going down that road.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Cool, man. Do that. Better than something bad happening. So
yeah.
I'd much rather hear that he just wants to be with family. Like there have been a couple players who have done that this year that have, even in this last window, you saw move from different teams because, their families were separated for 8 to 10 months, if not longer sometimes. And that just wore on people.
Yeah. The release from CF Montreal quoting Henri, going down after what we've already discussed. The separation is too much of a strain for me and my kids. Therefore, it's with much sadness I must take the decision to return to London and leave CF Montreal. I'd like to thank the fans, players, and all the staff of this club that have made me feel so welcome. Thank Kevin Gilmore, Olivier Renard, of course, Joey, and all the Saputo family. Quoting Renard, sporting director at CF Montreal. Thierry's departure is unfortunate and premature because this was very promising, but he informed me of his desire to be back with his family because the situation was and remains very difficult for both him and his family. So, appointed head coach November 14th, 2019. 2020 led the team to the playoffs for the first time since 2016 with 8-13-2 record. Team that also reached the quarters of CONCACAF Champions League. So
now, I'm going to do two things here because it pains me to do this, but I am going to play the role, even though he is on the call, Jarrett Smith and Nick Alifi, and do this. Yes, the Black Helicopter sailing in to bring you possibly this. And I'm going to ask the question, does this mean that Gabriel Batistuta is heading to Montreal? Remember, there was the rumor about Batigol coming to MLS, and now there's an opening, and I don't think this happened overnight, and, Black Helicopters, and here you go.
It's possible.
Were you impressed with that,
The
Jared?
name that entered my head was still Patrick Vieira. But
Yeah.
I'm going to fly the Black Helicopter and say that this didn't happen overnight.
Flying the Black Helicopter.
I don't think it happened overnight. I think there might be a follow-up announcement. I'm really wondering if Batigol gets announced quickly.
Yeah, I was thinking Vieira or Tarrant, but Vieira would have been my number one. So, but no, I endorse your helicopter of this announcement begetting a second announcement, and that this was not something that just was a snap decision by Thierry Henry, and they're fishing for another head coach.
J-Dub likes my Black Helicopter impression more than the actual sounder. I didn't think it was a good impression. I don't really know how to do it. I'm just kind of winging it. I don't know. I think it could be Batigol. I really do. Okay, back to just clean up stuff on the TV side. Yes, I could see CBS as a player for MLS rights. Absolutely. People said on the Twitch pitch that it's being reported as the English language rights. The reason why I ask is, one, if they're going to do Argentina Liga Profesional de Football games in English. I would like to be involved in that, really, some way, possibly. Please. Second, it's just never been done. It's not like the Champions League games where they can pull a world feed that is produced by the host broadcasters and produced in Europe. You don't have those in Argentina and Brazil. There's no English language feed going out worldwide. So they're going to have to do that here, I guess, or work with these leagues to do it themselves. So I don't know what that looks like. But anyway. We'll see where that goes. One other thing on TV news, there was a lot of talk about the Bally Sports RSNs having their own streaming app that would be over the top. That's not going to happen until 2022. So, also, it appears that they have been having a rough go at maintaining carriage on the streamers, and it didn't seem like on their investor call, Chris Ripley, the president and CEO here, didn't make it seem like much progress has been made in them returning to services like YouTube TV or Hulu.
Yeah, St. Clair traditionally hasn't made a whole lot of friends in the TV industry when it comes to carriage and all the negotiations.
Yes, so not good at all. On the MLS front, DC United is busy acquiring things and also acquiring players or close to it. They're finalizing a deal for a loan for American defender Brendan Hines-Ike. They have a tentative deal in place to trade Luciano Acosta's rights to Cincinnati, although Cincinnati getting Luciano Acosta from Liga MX is proving to be difficult. They also apparently are going to get something in trade, I'm assuming allocation money, for former academy player Michael Edwards, who is at Wolfsburg 2 right now and is returning to MLS to play for Colorado. He never played in MLS for DC, but he came through their academy. So they would have his rights. They're going to trade those to Colorado for allocation money. So DC is very, very busy on that front. What else do we have on Twitter? What else do we have on the Twitch pitch before we need to go, John?
Let's see. Twitter. There's a Thursday Thoughts kind of a question from Bartimus Prime, and it had to do with the 10 out there on the pitch.
Okay, hold that thought real fast. I have to put my hand up again because I screw stuff up a lot today. France is not in the Olympics because they got knocked out in the quarterfinals. I forgot the European qualification process for the Olympics is very difficult. UEFA sends their top 3 finishers from the previous World Cup to the Olympics. That is the Netherlands, that is Team GP because of what England did, and it's Sweden. So no France in the Olympics. So they are not a contender. So Team GB becomes a contender in my top 4. Thank you, Bart.
First off, well, Captain Redbeard says for the Paramount Plus, carve out a national Wednesday night game of the week on CBS right away. Saturday afternoon night games after the SEC deal ends. Stream all games without geo-block. Broadcast locally on CW, CBS, Sports Network.
Hold. That is what Captain Redbeard would have them do if they get the MLS rights.
Right.
That is not for anything else.
No.
Okay, you didn't say that.
By the MLS rights, and that was his plan.
Thank you. That was the important element of that was left out. I wanted to make sure. Because, no, they should not clear those time spots for the Argentine League or the Brazilian League. I would love it, but they're not programming to me. You're not going to replace the SEC on CBS with the Argentine League, although I would go nuts for it. Not many others would, and I understand that. So for MLS, even still, that is a big jump, and that's a big change. You're going to have to put in a lot of work to grow it to that level. It can be done. But that is not an easy just swap out. So there's work that would need to be done. Some of those points are really, really good for what they could do if they get the MLS rights. But they got to win the MLS rights first. They don't have them.
And
Vern Lundquist calling Palmeiras games would just be absolutely amazing.
That'd be hilarious.
This might be a question for tomorrow as a holdover, but I will put it out in here now. Bart says, he says, I'm going to ask this of Soccer Down Here, so we could debate better. So this is out here for the universe. There's a difference between playing in the 10 position and being a number 10. And so Bart wanted to have that as part of the debate.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily a position anymore where it's only in one place on the field. Lionel Messi has played as a number 10 from a wide position quite often. Many teams do. Independiente played Barco in a wide position and didn't play him as a true number 10. Barcelona has done this with Messi. With Pep, they kind of arranged things around where it wasn't necessarily just a 10. At times they did, but not always. Manchester City with Pep, they don't play with a true number 10. Liverpool doesn't play with a true number 10. There's a lot of top teams that don't play with a true number 10. Because to do that, you've got to structure the team around that player to give them total freedom, and it limits how many players you can get forward. And as we've talked about with Gabriel Heinze, you're wanting to get as many numbers forward to flood the attacking half as possible, and you're wanting to fill those channels. So you don't want to dedicate a channel to needing certain support behind to get it done. You can play as a number 10 in different positions on the field. That's the way I see it.
Jarrett, what do you think? Being a 10 and having a 10.
There's more than one way to skin a cat. However you want to lay it out. But you want to have like a unique guy who sits in the middle, wears the shirt and is the archetype. That's however you want to do it. having somebody play that role mentally, though, I mean, it's just something different. I mean, and for Atlanta's sake, for example, like Miguel Almiron's a really unique case, because I think that's the guy we always associate with the number 10, especially here in Atlanta, where people's history of like emotionally attaching to a guy, it might be limited to that. Almiron was kind of like a 10-8 hybrid that grew in a lab somewhere and then was fed whatever the hell you feed Sonic the Hedgehog, because he would do all that tracking back, and it wasn't like having an isolated 10 chilling out up there who you're thinking, well, we got to cover for him defensively. No, he would take off and burn the grass up around him, and he was a unique case in that instance. And he was a very unique player that doesn't kind of play in that traditional role that you're thinking of.
All right, we're going to finish with this. The talk about money in Europe and Champions League and Europa League and all that, we're going to save that for tomorrow, and we'll talk about the effects of it. There's a really interesting piece at AS about Real Madrid and how they might make up a lot of the losses they're looking at, that they would have had exhibition games, they would have had a preseason tour, they would have had all these different things. They might make up those losses if they get deeper into the Champions League. We'll talk about how important that is. We're going to save that for tomorrow. Tonight on Fanatis, the Brasileiro, it all comes down to the last match day in Brazil. Flamengo has the lead by 2 points over Internacional, 71 points to 69. Nobody else can win the title. There is going to be competition for Copa Libertadores spots. Gremio is in the final spot right now by a point. Palmeiras is out. They're in the Sudamericana spots at the moment. They are 1 point back, so they could jump there. There's also going to be some back and forth about qualifying directly for the group stage for Libertadores or going into the next play-in round. Fluminense and Sao Paulo will be battling it out there. So your games to watch, and they're all kicking off at the same time, which is going to be total bonkers. Flamengo, your leaders, are on the road at Sao Paulo, who, again, have something to play for themselves. This is a huge game because if Sao Paulo defeats Flamengo, then that opens up the door, and that creates the opportunity for Internacional to win their first title in 41 years in Brazil if they can get the win that they need at home against Corinthians, who is in 10th place and has been winless in their last 4. They've not exactly been great here lately. So the game that I'm going to have on primarily is that Sao Paulo Flamengo game. I will have all the scores up separately to watch what's going on and everything else. Sao Paulo's gotten a draw in their last 3 home games. They need a win here. Flamengo's won 5 of their last 6 in total. However, Sao Paulo have beaten them the last 3 times they've faced off. What are the numbers in this one?
Haven't changed a whole lot since Monday night. Sao Paulo's a plus 380. The draw option has dropped a little bit to just south of plus 300. Flamengo hasn't budged a whole lot. They were to minus 145. Internacional is still a big favorite at home.
Didn't we pick this one as well? What did we pick?
Let's see. You picked Sao Paulo.
I want chaos.
Yeah, as do I. Nick said Flamengo. Jarrett and I have the draw option.
So you don't want that much chaos. I want chaos. I want Sao Paulo to win this thing, and they've won the last 3 times they played them. Let's go, Sao Paulo. Let's invite some chaos. Then we'll be keeping an eye on the Internacional game. If Inter wins and Flamengo loses, then Inter wins the title after losing to Flamengo last match. This is craziness. Fanatis, if you have the Brasileiro pack, it is an extra expenditure. But if you have that, these games are all at 7:30 Eastern time. They will be worth your time because they'll be crazy. That's going to do it for us. Be on the lookout later on your pod catchers for the latest Written on the Pitch with myself and Jessica Charman. We're going to talk She Believes, but we'll talk other things as well. That'll be available for you probably later this afternoon. So be on the lookout. We'll have our show tomorrow morning as well. We'll dig deeper into Atlanta United after a couple days of training camp. Mike Conti will be joining us at 10 o'clock. We will try to analyze still pictures and little pieces of video from training that are out there. And we'll talk about updates on Lautaro Giannetti, which it sounds like that deal's getting closer and closer. Not done yet, but we're just waiting on an announcement. According to reports on both sides of it, here from Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic, but also from Cesar Luis Merlo and others in Argentina, it appears that an agreement has been reached for a 5-year deal for the player, but the transfer portion of it has been agreed to. That was the issue that was holding it up. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Hopefully we'll see if there's an announcement here very soon. We'll talk about anything else that happens between now and then. Enjoy Europa League. Enjoy the Brasileiro tonight. Mucho platiel.
Mucho platiel.
Mucho platiel.